So yes, I do work for Investec. I think as many of you know, that's a bank. I've been there for about 5 years. I've played a number of roles. Currently, although I'm described as systems architect, I think I spend most of my time in development. And through this presentation, I'll explain to you why that's important to us. So I guess if you take any organization, yes, I know we've got to look after and keep water and lights going. We've got to keep the system stable. But I think as F&B is showing us, there's a great opportunity for innovation. It's something you can market, you can sell, you can productize, and clients love it, add value. So the overarching problem that we stuck with is how do we create an environment that supports developer excellence? Because if we get that right, developers build useful stuff. But that's not good enough, because if you get inspired developers, you can build awesome stuff, all right? That's if we let them. I think corporates are notorious for this conflict in the organization between what I call the ops community, which is, guys, let's keep everything stable, all right? Let's not make any changes. And on the other side, you have the change community, the guys who look after what the clients really need and want and would like. And the dev community epitomizes that, and their objective is to destabilize the environment. So in corporates, we tend to default to, let's just keep everything stable, let's not break anything that we've got. I don't know how many of you listen to TED Talks. This is a guy called Dan Pink. It's a really lovely talk. I encourage you to listen to it if you haven't heard it before. I'm not going to try the silly thing and play a video. What Dan talks about is say, all right, typically we motivate people with money. We incentivize people with money. And typically that works very, very well if the kind of people who incentivize are doing stuff where they don't have to apply judgment. They've just got to do a mechanical task, and there's a strong correlation between offering incentives and seeing an increase in productivity. However, when you get to role types where they have to apply judgment, money incentives actually de-incentivize people, all right? And what does incentivize them, though, are those three things. A sense of autonomy, all right? Let me get on doing what I need to do because I'm a professional. I've qualified for this, I've got lots of experience. I typically am closest to the problem and the solution. Just let me get on with it, don't interfere. That's the first thing. The second thing is mastery. Allow me to get better at what I do, all right? If I can't get better at what I do, I'm typically going to get involved in stuff outside of work then, all right? Open source projects. And finally, a sense of purpose. Why am I doing this? Why is it important? If you can lock into those three things, you will typically be able to motivate and inspire people who have to use judgment. It's a great video. I encourage you to give it a listen. So what I'm going to really talk about is a problem we've got, a problem we had. It's a bit of a case study. Then I've got to chat about my brother. All right, he's older than me. He's a winemaker. But I'll get to that later. And then hopefully if my story was compelling, the case study, you'd be interested to know how we did it. So our internet banking solution went live in 1999. Keep in mind, Investec we're actually quite a small player. A lot of you talk about the big four, we talk about the big five. We wanted to take a credit card to market. We don't have a branch network. So we focused on two things. A call center. Those of you are clients, we've got an awesome call center. And we needed to exploit digital channels. So we went live in 1999, very proud of it, still proud of it. It was the first Java banking app that went onto the internet in South Africa. Our competitors claim the glory that they used SMS before anybody else. That's not true, we did. It's something we're still proud of. And it was a very successful launch. The business matured, the feature set was very rich, so we outsourced the support and maintenance and enhancements of this application to a partner in India. And it started off going very, very well. However, over a 7-year period, what we found is that because we'd outsourced it, we lost a lot of technical IP. Through the loss of IP, we typically focused on the functional, we neglected the non-functional. Over 7 years, the internal structure of the app deteriorated, our costs went up, and our time to delivery went up as well. So we couldn't get features out the front door, and eventually that got to a point where the app stagnated. So we then decided to replace. We then, because we lost all our IP, we ran an RFP process. It was a very, very intensive RFP process. Exhaustive, I think. Exhausting is the word. Selected a product in 2010. However, I think because we had an existing client base with an existing and the product had an existing apps, had an existing feature set, it was very hard to implement that product. And after 2.5 years, we cancelled that project. So those were dark days. Lots and lots of learnings for us. But you're still stuck with the problem because we've got this existing app. So we brought that in-house. We got a very, very small team. Oh, I pressed the wrong button. No. We put a very, very small team together. Skilled people, a good mix, actually a good mix of new people as well. And after 3 months, we refurbished the app top down. We changed the look and feel. Our look and feel at that point was very, very dated. So we completely changed the user experience. And we launched an iPad app simultaneously as well, which we've been trying to do for 2 years separately. So it was a very, very powerful lesson for us, very, very good outcome for us. So beyond that, we're now delivering what used to take us 6 months in 3 weeks with a team quarter the size. So let me just tell you how we did it. But first, my brother, older brother. There's some lovely lessons here. So my brother, when he left school, he went and worked for Barlow, and he did an apprenticeship. And when he started, they said, you know, son, here's a toolbox, all right? And the toolbox had nothing in. And he said, but how can I work with this? He said, no, we'll give you an allowance. And each month he'd go and buy a couple of tools. And there's some rules around these tools. You never borrow anybody else's tools, they're your tools, all right? When you leave the organization, you take your toolbox with you. It is your toolbox, all right? If you don't have the right tool for the job, you don't do the job, okay? As I said, he's now a winemaker, and he makes wine in Romania. His toolbox is in Stellenbosch. I emailed him and said, just to have this conversation. And he said, look, here are pictures of my toolbox. So he walks around the world with photographs of his toolbox. And it's obviously a metaphor. The metaphor here is quite simple, is these guys have created an environment that makes technicians very, very proud of their tools. And they're very, very important to who they are. And these guys know how to use their tools. So if you look at our environment, we're trying to create the same ecosystem, I could call it the same ethos, which is developers, project managers, analysts, know your tools. Don't say the organization hasn't sent me on training, all right? Or the organization won't get me this license, all right? Because it's you, it's your career. So, but obviously, you know, being a bank, the thought of having developers running around using whatever tool they want is terrifying. So we had to make sure that we properly govern the environment. So on the right-hand side, you've got, call it the target systems, right? Dev, pre-prod, test, whatever it is, production. Those are completely locked down. Developers don't have access to those environments. So we're not going to contaminate the stuff where clients' money is held with developers going berserk, all right? In the middle, you could almost see that logically as a firewall, all right? Because the thing we care most about is our version control, and that's non-negotiable for us, all right? Developers, you've got to check into version control. We will tell you what the version control is. And we've got a build server, and that will do the builds, and you'll get feedback from those builds, and those builds will do the deployment into these environments on the far right. But that opens lots of opportunities for us, all right? Because ultimately, the developer is just creating text files, all right? And they can do whatever they want to. They create any way they want to. For interest's sake, given this is a Linux and open source kind of exercise, I thought I'd just share with you the products that we do use. So on that picture, on the right-hand side, you've got our app stack. The only one we really spend money on is Oracle. SUSE, it's a licensed SUSE as well, because we just want to make sure we get the right support in the event of we need support. Beyond that, we don't use a licensed JBoss, we use the open source one. We use the open source Apache. On our build server, nothing is paid for there. Sonar is open source, Jenkins, the Apache products. Subversion is free. On the developer station, I just walked around the office and said, what do you guys use? And I just made a note and I put their icons there. The stuff we pay for there is Microsoft and Apple Logs, and the hardware, of course. So that just gives you a feeling that we're allowing our developers an enormous amount of freedom on their workstations, because we want to encourage them to go and find stuff that adds value. So these are our developer principles. I normally get a chuckle for the first one. If it ain't free, we don't want it. And there's a psychology here, all right? So in an organization, let's imagine I have to go and buy something. I've got to go and put a motivation together. I've got to go and talk to marketing people. So clearly this product will solve all my problems. I've then got to go and express and put my name and my brand and my reputation that this is the right product, all right? Then I'm going to go and buy it. Then I'm going to go and use it for a while, and I realize it's a bad marriage, all right? Then what do? Well, I just toughen up, and I make sure I make it work, all right? That is really not smart, okay? So it creates the wrong attitude if you got to go and motivate and buy stuff, all right? And yes, sometimes we get it right, but sometimes we get it wrong. And do we really want developers being constrained by the products that they are using simply because of ego and reputation? It doesn't sound like good business to me. So we've now just said categorically, if it's not free, we're not even going to look at it. Don't even come and talk to us. We don't care. We use whatever works. And if you go through this, it's very, very practical. It's very pragmatic. All right. And then the last line, we are absolutely ruthless. If it doesn't work, we throw it out. All right. So now this talks a lot to autonomy. All right. Developers, go and own your world. We're not going to dictate to you what you're going to use. We will measure you on the success of the stuff you deliver, not how you deliver it. Deliver it well. And it also creates an opportunity for developers becoming better. All right, they can improve themselves. Encouraged to go out and see what's out there. There's a whole bunch of research that says the only way people truly learn is through feedback. All right, and the longer you delay feedback, the slower your rate of learning becomes. So, in the development process, we are finding ways to get feedback as quickly as possible to the developers. So the obvious ways with lava lamps, those are in actual fact are lava lamps. So the way that works is developers do some coding. We check in often, do that version control. All right. Often the ethos is I check in when I'm finished. Well, that's not good enough. Check in when you made a change. All right. So in a space of an hour, I'll typically do between 8-15 check-ins. Each change it gets checked in. As soon as it gets checked in, our build server kicks off the build. If the build fails, the lava lamp glows red. The whole floor sees that I've now broken the build. I promise you, the sweat starts to run. I promise you, my back becomes wet. The chirps start. Other teams start to chirp, but it's wonderful. It's based on Toyota's Andon cord. All right, so the Andon cord's been pulled. All the other developers stop what they're doing immediately. All right. The rule is no check-ins when the lava lamp's red. They will all come and sit around me and say, how can they help? All right. I typically tell them to bugger off. Okay. But the whole team is now geared towards getting this lava lamp green. Okay. And you don't get it green by removing unit tests. You get it green by fixing the underlying problem. So at any point in time with this feedback loop, I know that the stuff the changes I'm making, tests are being kicked off in the background, and that I know that I'm not breaking anything that someone else has done. The other one is continuous feedback through the test I've spoken to. We also run metrics on our code base, and on the bottom right is just a screenshot of it. Please don't look at our test coverage. So we're still working on it. But in essence, we've got a whole lot of rules, lots and lots of rules. And those rules are applied against the entire code base. And the next day we have a look, how did we do the previous day? And all we really care about is that our metrics are going in the right direction. The details aren't that important because some practices aren't right. We've got to get better, continuous improvement, but it's a wonderful way to make sure that the issues we had when we outsourced, where the internals were destroyed over time, that we're on top of that. The consequence of this is lots and lots of conversations happen between developers around how do we get better, right? Code quality improves, value to client goes up. I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but there's this whole culture that's developing around the software craftsman. And we're also bringing that in-house as well. So essentially, I spoke about my brother up front, about having a deep sense of pride in what you do and your practices and the tools that you use to do what you do. And so we're trying to get that right. So we have brown bag sessions. Brown bag sessions are over lunchtime, bring your brown bag with your SAMIs. Somebody goes on the internet, finds a YouTube video, and we watch it. It takes less than an hour, all right? Being developers, when the video stops, we'll get up and walk out, all right? It's quite weird. I haven't got guys having conversations on that one. But we've learned a heck of a lot of new practices through this simple ritual of twice a week, just getting together, watching the video. If I had more time, I'd take you through practices that we picked up, and I've got measures as to how that's improved and made us more productive. The other thing is that there's a vibrant meetup community, or set of meetups that take place in Joburg. Again, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this. Lean Startup, great community of people who meet once a month. Into Ruby on Rails, great community who meet up once a month. Java, Linux, and I see it just started up now, is this thing called DevOps. So there's a DevOps community that's going to start meeting once a month. And it's quite wonderful when I attend these sessions, is you've got, the speakers are really not strong, all right? They're quite insecure, and because they're basically techies, all right? But they've got pearls of wisdom, and I really encourage for you to get your guys and even yourselves to go and join some of these meetups. Create a good community. And then lastly, what we did is we changed our conditions of service. So we encourage developers to connect with these communities outside of the organization, all right? But then we've also got to say, well, all right, if you write code that's part of an open source project, you've got to put it back into that project base, into that code base. So we've changed our conditions of employment that when a developer joins us, they're able to contribute to the open source community. Yes, it's got to go through some sort of governance process, and managers got to be aware. We've got to make sure that we don't bleed our IP out of the organization. But it makes our developers feel very, very connected. So they don't feel like they're just consuming the work of other people, but they actually add value to that external community. It comes down to tying it into a deeper purpose, because if we don't do it through their working hours, the good ones will do it at home anyway. All right, so why do we want to create a fractured existence for people? On the right-hand side are just some of the themes or topics of videos that we looked at. The one at the top, expectations of your CTO. I think I've become religious about this particular one. It's a guy called Bob Martin. I don't know if you've heard of him. This guy he's like an evangelist, but he's a techie. And what he really talks to there is do you want to be amateur or professional? And if you're an amateur, if you're a laborer, laborers get told what to do and how to do it. All right. If you're a professional, people tell you what to do and you work up the how. And then he says, if you go to the doctor and your doctor qualified 20 years ago, all right, do you expect to get advice that's 20 years old? Or do you expect to get advice that's modern and topical? And then translate that into your development community. So you've been a dev for 10 years? What have you done to learn over the last 10 years? I'm not saying doing the same thing over and over again, because that's the same as a doctor who's using 20-year-old knowledge. So it's a very, very challenging talk that it really changed a lot the thinking amongst our developers at Investec. So closing. I think we had a wonderful outcome. All right. When I was preparing this, and I got to the slide, and I thought, I don't know why you guys would believe me. Because if you look at the trauma we had, outsourcing, losing control of the internals of the app, running a very strong textbook RFP process. We had vendors from all over the world come and talk to us. We went and chatted to their clients. We went and we did site visits. We did the whole lot. All right. I mean, as a shareholder of Investec, our shareholders would have been very happy with the diligence that we took, but that didn't give us the outcome we wanted. All right. So why would you believe that it would work? So I think you can't do this with the same people with the same mindset. All right. You have to. We had to change the mindset of the people to get such a stepwise outcome. You got to focus on, or we had to focus on, treating people like people and being respectful of them and their profession and what their aspirations are. The Dan Pink video was quite instrumental in how we got guys motivated and involved. All right, quite instrumental. And if you still don't believe me, then come and chat to me. And if I can't convince you, then come and visit us. And I'll take you around the floor. You can talk to people. I'll show you the code base. I will show you where, because I didn't mention our vendors. You can go and meet the vendors that we make use of. But this is an authentic story. Thank you.
Which suggests you needed the buy-in of kind of the management to get behind this. Was that a difficult conversation? Was there a process there in getting them on board and explaining what you wanted to do?
Actually, not at all. It comes down to, if you want to make use of open source software, then you've got to be respectful of the license agreement. All right? And if you want to make changes to it, you're actually compelled to take those changes and put them back to the community. And as a bank, we obviously are very sensitive to, trust and honouring agreements. So perhaps the hard bit was to say, look, these tools are valuable. Once we had crossed that bridge, then it was easy to get folk to understand that if we were going to use them and we were going to change them, we had to contribute back. That is actually quite easy.
Okay. Now you've got this kind of capsule of open source excellence among your developers. Does that reach out beyond that group, elsewhere in the organization? Do you have other people wanting to achieve improvements in productivity or use alternative tools?
Look, I think we do have factions. So we do have the Microsoft faction. But I find between the factions, we talk a lot about the practice.
Right.
So the idea of continuous feedback is very important to us. Test-driven development is very important to us. I think it's less about the tool, funnily enough. It's more about getting people inspired so they can grow and learn and all that sort of stuff. And if you get that right, then the value follows. And then people want to be successful. So folks start to talk together, or talk with each other and share. So in our group, yes, we've gone very hard down this path. There are other groups that are now following. I think practically in a corporate, there are two styles. One is to take everybody on the journey, all right? And the other one is to say, well, to hell with it, I'm just going to go and see who follows. I think because we were in such a dark place on that particular platform, and it was such a visible platform, that we were given a lot of freedom to get it right, to do what we needed to do to get the outcome. So we took some liberties as well.
Does that freedom extend to the cloud? Are you happy for developers to sign up for cloud services?
Yes and no. All right. So for example, we do make use of AWS in the UK. So we do offload computation onto AWS for certain risk models. but we remain very cautious around client data, and often if you depersonalize it to such an extent that I can give you a CD with the data on, then it's not always that valuable. So certainly on our back office processing, we're still conservative around that. Devs, we're not uncomfortable for devs to make use of cloud services, but we don't make use of cloud services in the dev space.
Fundamentally gone back to the basics.
Yeah.
Plan for, put it in a test environment, put it in a pre-production environment. You allow the user using the right to all that documentation.
So I think there's a normal analyst work that takes place, and so that still continues to take place. Funnily enough, the trend at the moment is away from commenting code. All right, and the reason for that is if you have to comment code, it gives you license to write code that's confusing, because you can make it up with a good, well-worded, well-phrased commentary. All right, so we've adopted clean coding practices, which really say that a method should be no more than 6-7 lines of code, should be self-evident, should be properly named. So we invest our energy in getting the naming right. Funny enough, naming is so important, and we don't mind if the name is 80 characters, because if it describes intent, then it's documentation in its own right. So we do code reviews, but it's all around driving that the code is readable and understandable. I was a skeptic, but it does actually work.
Passing on this energy as well as the programming skills in that?
Not yet. So our tentacles are going out into the meetups. We are currently trying to find a way to. The software craftsmanship I spoke about. There's a very strong UK fraternity. We are exploring how we can start that fraternity up in Joburg.
Can we visit?
I'm sitting over there. I'll be more relaxed now. You can ask that table. I was very tense before this.
Graeme, thank you very much for your time. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you.